This evening we shall discuss the teachings of dependent originations, Paticca Samuppada. Our practice of mindfulness meditation, vipassana meditation, will lead us to realize that all phenomena are arising due to condition. And the teachings of dependent origination is very profound. It is said in the scriptures that one who sees dependent arising sees the Dharma. One who sees the Dharma sees dependent arising. So you can verify your practice and experience with this profound teaching. The gist of this teaching is explained clearly in various discourses. The gist is when this exists, that comes to be, with the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. So if you do practice mindfulness meditation or vipassana meditation correctly, you may get a clear understanding of the gist of these profound teachings. So when meditators practicing mindfulness in accordance with the guideline, in other words, be mindful and note whatever object that's arising at that moment as it duly occurs. If the object does not arise, then it's not possible to make any mental noting. There's no arising of mindfulness or awareness. At the beginning of practice, the mindfulness is quite weak, and the mind doesn't note any object by itself. So meditators have to put forth mental effort to guide the mind or to lead the mind to the object. For example, when there's a movement of rising, then the mind or the consciousness will be arising, cognizing or knowing the rising movements. That's why the meditators can mindful and note the rising movements. So it's the characteristics of the consciousness to cognize or to know the arising of an object or phenomenon. But when mindfulness is not well developed, then meditators need to put forth enough mental effort so that the mindfulness could perceive the object clearly and staying with that process of the object until it has disappeared by itself. So when the mindfulness is getting sharper and stronger, and when mindfulness meditators are able to develop constant and continuous mindfulness for a longer and longer period of time, then they come to realize that the mindfulness goes to the object, of phenomenon by itself. Or sometimes meditators experience or realize that the mindfulness is arising almost at the same time or at the same moment with the arising of an object or phenomenon. So meditators realize that the arising of the mindfulness or awareness is dependent on the arising of an object. And if the object is not permanent, definitely the mindfulness or awareness which is arising dependent on that object is also not permanent. This is explained clearly in the scriptures. For example, in one of the sutta or discourses found in the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses, the Buddha explained that form is impermanent. What is impermanent is suffering. What is suffering is non-self. What is non-self should be seen as it really is with a correct wisdom. Thus, this not mine, this I'm not, or this not myself. Then Buddha explained further, feeling is impermanent, perception is impermanent, volitional formations are impermanent, consciousness is impermanent. What is impermanent is suffering. What is suffering is non-self. What is not non-self should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom or task. This not mine, or this I'm not, this not myself. Then in the next discourse, the Buddha explained that form is impermanent. The cause and condition for the arising of form is also impermanent. As form has originated from what is impermanent, how could it be permanent? Since the arising of the form is dependent on a condition which is impermanent, then how could it be permanent? So in other words, what's arising dependent on something which is impermanent, it also has the nature of impermanence. Then the Buddha explains the next four aggregates in the same way. So To understand the teaching, then meditators need to practice mindfulness meditation. The 4 foundations of mindfulness correctly. If they do not practice the 4th foundation of mindfulness correctly, they could not realize cause and effect, or in other words, conditionality clearly. Everything arising is dependent on condition. When one is being conditioned, sometimes that also can condition the arising of the following phenomenon. For example, the sound or the noise. Whenever there's a rising of the sound or the noise, then this sound or noise condition the arising of the consciousness of hearing. So meditators realize the cause of an effect. If there's no sound, arising of sound, then there's no arising of consciousness. So this arising of consciousness of hearing is an effect. It is caused by the arising of the sound. So this consciousness of hearing can become a cause. It can become a cause for the arising of awareness or mindfulness. That means there's arising of awareness, perceiving the arising of consciousness. But in the ultimate reality, consciousness, there's only one consciousness arising at each moment. Only when with the passing away of the hearing consciousness, then the following consciousness of knowing or this awareness arising. But mental processes are very rapid or very swift. Sometimes it gives us an impression that the consciousness of the mind is able to perceive 2 or 3 phenomena at the same moment, and so on. But what has been emphasized here, that if meditators do practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness correctly, then they come to realize that when there's an object, when there's a physical object or a physical phenomenon, for example, the rising movements during the sitting meditation, or hardness, coldness are arising, then there will be arising of awareness. So, in those, when this exists, that comes to be, with the arising of this, that arises. when this does not exist, that does not come to be. So if there's no arising of this physical phenomenon, for example, rising movements, then mindfulness awareness could not arise. So when the movements, when the rising movements has ceased, definitely the mindfulness or awareness that noted the movements arising will cease as well. But if the mindfulness and concentration are not strong enough, then meditators could not see clearly. When meditators begin to make some progress in the mindfulness, we always remind meditators to strengthen the power of mindfulness, to make progress in mindfulness. In other words, we put forth effort to develop mindfulness, to cultivate mindfulness. When mindfulness is getting stronger, sharper, then the mindfulness will be able to perceive every object clearly and know it as it duly occurs. At the beginning of practice, the mindfulness relies on the object of phenomenon. In other words, if the object is very strong, very clear, then it seems like the mindfulness is also clear. Those meditators could perceive the object clearly when the object is very clear, very strong. In other words, that clear mindfulness dependent on the object. If the object of phenomenon is very clear, very strong, then the mindfulness is clear as well. But meditators have to rely on the strong object so that the mindfulness seems very strong. When there's no strong object or strong phenomenon, then the mindfulness seems weak, not attentive, not able to mindful and note it as it duly occurs. But when meditators could develop the mindfulness well, strengthen the power of mindfulness, then the mindfulness will be able to mindful and note any object as it duly occurs. So sometimes meditators keep on practicing. They experience that the rising movements or the falling movements are getting subtle, compare with previous sessions of sitting or previous days and so on. So the movements of rising and falling appears quite subtle. Yet there is no other stronger object appearing at that time. So if the mindfulness is not yet well developed, then the mindfulness cannot mindful and note that subtle object at that time. But if the mindfulness is well developed, and at the moment the movements of rising or movement falling is quite subtle, and at the same time there's no other stronger object. If meditators have developed mindfulness well, the mindful meditators will be able to note that subtle rising movements or subtle falling movements as it duly occurs. So we always instruct meditators to develop mindfulness or to cultivate the mindfulness. So when meditators make progress in the mindfulness, then they will be able to realize clearly the arising and passing away of any object that was noted at the time. But they may be not yet able to see the process of mindfulness clearly. So they should be patient, be mindful, and note every object as it really occurs. And when they are able to increase the mental effort gradually, then they begin to see the process of mindfulness clearly as well. So in other words, when there's a object arising, then the mindfulness will appear immediately at that place. So sometimes meditators should not exercise strong control over the process of mindfulness or awareness. If meditators did not exercise control over the process of mindfulness, then they could realize the mindfulness or awareness will go to the stronger object by itself. For example, when meditators are mindful of rising movements, if there's a painful sensation arising and is stronger, more distinct than the rising movements, the mindfulness will move by itself to the stronger pain. The meditators should mindful, note pain. When meditators are mindful and note pain, if they know there's a desire to move or to change a sitting postures, actually at the moment of knowing the desire, the mindfulness is not with the pain at that moment. But sometimes the mindfulness meditators could not see that. They may assume that the mind is, or the awareness is still staying with the pain, while they know that there's a desire arising or desire to move or to change the postures. So meditators have to know from their experience of meditation. It means you have to learn from your experience in order to make progress. Then you may come to realize that the mindfulness is not active. Then you should make the mindfulness more active. So when meditators are practicing correctly, then they come to realize everything arising due to condition. So one who has some knowledge independent originations, paticca samuppada, they will come to understand better and better. So what is the arising dependent conditions is not permanent, is subject to passing away, and it is not easy to realize these three common characteristics: anicca, dukkha, and anatta. We may understand well that anicca means arising and passing away, appearing and disappearing, but the commentaries explain in more details. Almost everyone who has studied the teaching of Buddha, you understand that anicca means impermanent, or arising and passing away, or appearing and disappearing. But sometimes those who have this understanding of impermanence by readings or through analyzing, might think that what had disappeared might appear again in the next moment or later on. But one who has realized the characteristics of impermanence, then they understand that what had disappeared or what had passed away will cease forever. It does not exist anymore. So the commentary explains in many ways. For example, the commentary defines impermanent as not being in existence. It comes into being and then ceases. So this phenomenon does not exist prior to its arising, but because of conditions, various conditions are met, then this phenomenon arises at that time. Then when it passes away, in other words, it ceases, it no longer exists. So another commentary also explains this characteristics of impermanence in another way. Although it means the same thing, the other commentaries say that non-existent after having been is the characteristics of impermanence. So it means if one aspires to see impermanent, one must realize that the object is arising due to the condition at that present moment. At that present moment. So if meditators could not see it, then they might have the idea that this object that had passed away previously will now appears again. So another commentary say that the meaning of anicca denotes things come where they never appeared before, and disappear to where they never went before. Oh. So we want to see conditionality clearly. Actually, the object which is arising at that moment is a new object. It's not the previous object. For example, sometimes meditators are mindful and note pain. Sometimes they could mindful note pain very attentively, precisely. Then they realize that the painful sensation has subsided and disappeared. Then a few minutes later, painful sensation arising. Meditators might think it's the same painful sensation arising again. So we have this idea, the same painful sensation arising again, or same thoughts, same memory arising again, is because we have been living in this conceptual world for so long. Concept give us an impressions or idea that is everlasting. Even though we understand it's impermanent, but we only understand impermanence in terms of concept. So we might have the idea what's arising at this time is the same thing, same object. So only meditators could realize impermanent again, clearly, sharply. Then they could see clearly what's arising at that time is a new object. Although the name could be pain, or could be rising movements, or falling movements, and so on. But meditators realize that it is a new object that's arising at the very present moment. So when meditators could see impermanence clearly, thoroughly, then they would also realize the other two characteristics, dukkha and anatta. We do not mindful of these three characteristics separately. Sometimes some people might say mindful impermanence, and then I'm mindful of the dukkha, and then be mindful of no self. But actually, every conditioned phenomenon has these three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta. That's why they are known as common characteristics, or the general characteristics of mental and physical phenomena. When one realizes one of the characteristics, one also realizes the other two characteristics. We do not see them separately at different times. But if the realizations of one of the characteristics is not complete or thorough, the meditators could not see the other two characteristics. That's why the scriptures say that what is impermanent is suffering. So when you experience strong pain, you are not yet realizing. As long as you have not realized the instant and arising and passing away of the painful sensation, then you are not yet realizing dukkha. When you could not see dukkha, you also could not see non-self. So the scriptures also define that dukkha, the dukkha lakkhana, the characteristics of suffering is the nature of being constantly oppressed by the instant arising and passing away. Then when meditators would realize this way, which is known as sankhara dukkha, then they come to realize non-self or no self, anatta. So the scriptures and commentaries also explains with some similes. Just like the sound of a musical instruments. For example, the scriptures give the similes of a lute. Lute is a kind of Chinese musical instruments. So, do you think the sound of the lute is stored inside the musical instruments? It's not really stored inside. So you see that prior to its arising, the sound of a lute, before the lute, these musical instruments was played by the musician. The sound is not stored anywhere. It's not being kept in anywhere. But when the musicians start to play it, then it will produce this musical sound. So when this when he stop playing, then the sound will disappear or vanish. So when it has vanished, does not mean the sound of the lute still persisting as a store or has gone to some place somewhere. So in other words, all material phenomena and mental phenomena not having been brought into being, having been, they vanish. They do not go to somewhere or persist as a store somewhere. So only meditators could realize these three common characteristics again and again for clearer and clearer for a longer and longer period of time. Then they will make a progress to a higher and higher stages of experience. So in other words, to make progress, meditators must be able to see cause and effect on those conditionality clearly. Everything arising due to condition. So in other words, during sitting meditation, when there's a phenomenon arising, then there's arising of mindfulness awareness. So the arising of the mindfulness awareness is dependent object. So if the object is not permanent, definitely the mindfulness awareness, which is dependent on that object, also not permanent. So during walking meditation, when there's arising of intention, then there's arising of awareness. So that intention is also not a permanent mental process. It's subject to passing away. So the intention is not a permanent process. So the mindfulness awareness that noted that mental state of intention is not everlasting, is also subject to passing away. Then there's arising of movements, then the arising of another process of mindfulness. But sometimes if the experience is not yet clear, the meditators might think it's the same process of mindfulness appear again and note the process of movements. So only meditators could realize the three common characteristics of the mental and physical phenomena again and again, clearer and clearer, then they could make more progress. And when meditators could realize the three common characteristics of mental and physical phenomena, at that moment they also realizing their individual characteristics. So this is important. So the gist of this teaching of dependent origination, when this exists, that will come to be, or when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. So when you practice correctly the four foundation mindfulness, then you shall be able to understand better and better the profound teachings of the Buddha, the dependent origination. So one who sees dependent arising, see the Dharma. One who sees the Dharma, see dependent arising. So I wish all meditators could develop the mindfulness, and practice the insight meditation in accordance with the teachings of four foundation mindfulness, so that you could see dependent arising clearly, and make more progress.